Tonight we are going to make a creamy tomato soup with some fried chicken cutlets and a homemade pretzels with some both cinnamon sugar and pretzel salt. So let's start out by getting our onions sauteed for our soup. We're going to saute up some onions, garlic, and fresh tomatoes. Then we'll add a little bit of chicken bouillon, some water, cream, and let it simmer, some spices, and then we'll puree it until it's nice and smooth. And then we'll bake up some homemade pretzels. I have the dough rising right now, or proofing. We'll shape them, boil them off in a baking soda bath. And then we'll bake them up at 450. And we'll hand bread some chicken breasts and fry them up. It's kind of a meal created by my son while he was helping me at the store. He was trying to help me decide what to make for dinner tonight, and it was kind of his genius collection of items. He wanted tomato soup, he wanted pretzels, and he wanted chicken, and so the dinner was born from it. Okay, we are going to dice these up. You can do a coarse dice on it because, again, we are going to puree all of our soup to make it a nice kind of like a tomato bisque, a nice thick but smooth soup. So I'm using 2 whole onions in here. They're small, so you could use one really large one, but I do want a good amount of that onion flavor to come through. We're going to put in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in our little Dutch oven here. I'm going to turn my heat on to about a 6, so a little over a medium high. And then I'm going to prep up my garlic so that we can toss our garlic here in a little bit. And then we're going to start shaping up our pretzels so that we can get ready to boil and bake them. So I've got a pot of fresh garlic here, so I'm going to open it up. Ooh, those onions are strong. They're really getting to my eyes right now. We're going to use a good amount of garlic in here because I do want the onions and the garlic to really pop in this soup. So I'm using probably like 6 or 7 cloves here. We're gonna mince it up. And I'm gonna mince it fairly small so we get a lot more of that garlic flavor out, and it has a chance to really saute up in our pan. So we'll give it a good mince. And while we will be pureeing it later, I do want it all to kind of get a good saute on it. Really bring out more of that rich garlic flavor versus the raw garlic flavor. So it will be about 2 tablespoons of freshly minced garlic, which you could always sub in for some garlic. Okay, that should be just good here. I'm going to grab a little spoon, give my onions a little toss, kind of coat them up in the olive oil. And then I'm going to go wash my garlic off my hands, and we're going to start shaping our pretzels. Okay. I'm going to turn this up now a little bit higher since we want to bring it to a nice boil before we add it. I have my pretzel dough. It's been proofing for about an hour. This is a yeast-based dough. I find that for pretzels, the yeast pretzels are just the absolute best. They make these just lovely soft pretzels. We are going to put in about a 4th cup of baking soda into my water here. This baking soda is going to help give the pretzels its nice kind of chewiness to it, give it a little bit of its kind of that taste. That should be good. So I don't use the lye, I just use the baking soda. because lye's pretty caustic and I don't want to have any chemical burns. Okay. I'm going to cut each and kind of divide my dough up here, and then I'm going to make, we'll make 12. So try to cut it as evenly as I can to make our 12 pretzels here. Although I always find that they never always turn out as even as I like them to do. This guy, I know he's going to be a little big, so I might add on to some. But try to get just as even so that way they'll all bake up roughly the same time. And now I don't do my traditional pretzel, like a traditional pretzel shape. I kind of do this like loop and swoop and twirl kind of thing because it's just so much faster than doing it the, the old school like shape. But we'll make a couple the old school way. But this is typically how I do it, where I kind of grab in the middle and I twirl it around and then I kind of pull it through. So it's not a true pretzel, but it gives you all of those little curves and stuff in it. It's a lot faster when you're making a whole bunch of pretzels to do it that way. Now, if you want to do it the traditional way, what you're going to do is you've got to make sure you roll your pretzel nice and long, because if you don't roll it long enough, you're not going to have enough base to do it. And then you kind of twist over. And you've got your little pretzel there. So it takes roughly the same. I just find that the other ones, I can go a little bit faster. I don't have to be as intentional with how I shape it on there. Because again, twist and pull. And these hold together a little bit nicer during the boiling process too. Sometimes if they haven't had enough time to sit and rest on each other, sometimes we'll get a little piece pop up in the traditional way. But we'll do a mixture here. That way we can always have a little bit of it. And then you want to tuck it under, because I just find that it seals into its little pocket if you tuck it under versus laying it on top. Now we're going to give our onions a little bit of a stir here. And once our water comes up to a nice boil, we'll start dropping these in. And you're going to boil these for about 30 seconds on each side to get the nice, like, chewy, soft pretzel texture. So these aren't going to be like the traditional crunchy German pretzels. These are going to be the nice soft pretzels. Let's give our onions a little bit of a stir here, and then we'll get back to it. Just kind of coat them up. I'm going to turn it down now to a 4. Losing a little pieces overboard. And we're just going to cook the onions until they have a nice caramelization on it. That way, they're going to have just a really great flavor when we puree it up. Again, you want to make sure they're completely translucent and have a nice little bit of a golden color to it. There we go. Tuck a little under. And give a good roll. And then I'm going to do a loop and swoop because, again, it goes faster with the loop and swoop and pull. And they all bake up pretty much the same way. Now, when we do boil these off into the water, they are going to puff up a little bit, get pretty dimply, but when we bake them, they're gonna double in size, so they'll get pretty big. And these are they're just like so delicious. They're probably everyone's like one of their favorite like kind of dinner roll bread thing. They absolutely love them on here. And you can actually season them with both pretzel salt or cinnamon sugar, but they're just really delicious. And the recipe is really, really simple. I do believe I have this recipe card out there for everybody. So I might have to go digging back into the spring for it. But again, you just start with 1.5 cups of warm water, and then you add in a tablespoon of yeast, active dry yeast, and then 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, and you let your yeast proof there, you know, get all foamy on top. And then after about 5 minutes, you'll add in 4 tablespoons of melted butter, 2 teaspoons of salt, give it a little mix, and then 4 cups of flour. You can use all-purpose or bread, either one works for this recipe. Knead it together nice for about 5 minutes until it's all incorporated. And then you just let it proof in a warm spot for about an hour. I had mine in my oven proofing. So it's a really, really easy recipe, and they're so good. And they don't need a double proof, you just have 1 proof time. Here, so roll it again out nice and long. And we're gonna do the little twirl and kind of pull it through. So it's a little bit of a modified pretzel, but it works. You know, normally a lot of times I will make these, and I'll make a double batch or a triple batch when I make them for family. And so when you're making that many of them, you want to be efficient in how quickly you can get them out. There we go. So we've got ours. I'm going to give my onions a little stir, and then we're going to start boiling these off. So we've got a nice boil in here with about 1/4 of a cup of our baking soda. And we're going to use a slotted spoon. So our slotted spoon is going to allow the water to kind of drip down when we pop them in there. I just use my hands. I pop them down face first. That way, when I take them out, the pretty side will be up, and it'll be easier to do it. Stop trying to flip over on me. There we go. Now, when you do boil them, you want to boil them in enough water that you can dunk them. I find it's much easier to poke them and flip them over after 30 seconds than trying to, if you're doing it in a pan in shallow water, than trying to pick them up and flip them. So have enough water in your pot that you can do the dunking. And then again, just 30 seconds on about each side, give or take. You can go up to a minute. The longer you boil it, the chewier your pretzel will be.
You have a question? Will you be cooking for 40+ people for Christmas?
No. Christmas, we actually do very different. So because we are such a large family, what my mom just started a long time ago is she gave up trying to get everybody together at Christmas. And her hope was to get everybody together at Thanksgiving, because Christmas is typically the more popular of the holidays. So she gave that up so she could have everybody together at Thanksgiving. So we're actually going to be just our family here for Christmas, because my mom is actually going to be, normally she would come here for it, but she's going to be going to Germany to visit her mom and her, brothers and sisters. So it will be just our small kind of family, which I think it'll be nice. We've done that. I do a smorgasbord and whatnot, but it is definitely for a much smaller crowd. Now, we are 7, so that's not that small, but it is kind of nice to have just like a more kind of intimate kind of gathering on there versus going super crazy. Here, we're going to put our garlic in here. We'll let that saute up for just a second. Now we're going to take our first batch of our pretzels out. And again, you need a slotted spoon for this. That way you can shake off that excess liquid. And you can see as I put them next to some of the uncooked ones, how much bigger in size they've already gotten from the boiling. And then they'll get even bigger from the baking. So we'll pop these guys in. And I can do about, this is, you know, I think my, 3-quart saucepan. I can do about 4 in here before it gets too crowded. Now, with this, you can make them different sizes. You don't have to make them 12. Sometimes I'll do 9 or 6, and I'll do really big ones. Just depends. You just have to change your baking time a little bit.
When you get a minute, can you go over the recipe for the pretzels?
Yes. So again, we do have this recipe card posted. You'll have to just go dig for it. But it starts out with 1.5 cups of warm water. Then you add a tablespoon of active dry yeast. 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. You're gonna let that yeast get nice and foamy and bloom for about 5 minutes. Then you're gonna add in 4 tablespoons of melted butter, 2 teaspoons of salt. Mix it up, and then 4 cups of flour. It can be either bread flour or you can use all-purpose flour. Both work really well in the recipe. Knead it all together, let it proof for about an hour, and then you shape it up and you boil it in water with about 1/4 cup of baking soda. And that baking soda again helps give it that nice pretzel-y texture, you know, a little bit of that skin to it for the soft one. Now, this isn't a cheap, crunchy pretzel like if you've ever had a traditional German pretzel where it's a little bit soft on the inside but has a really crunch on the outside. That's typically from the Lie. These are not like that. They're more like the Annie Ann's, the Pretzel Times. They're really delicious. Good shake. And I also use this recipe to make pretzel buns. So if I'm gonna do, like, sometimes I'll do like burgers with a pretzel bun or fried chicken sandwich with a pretzel bun. This recipe works well with that. You just shape them into, you know, kind of flatter circles. And then they'll kind of puff up on there. Okay, got these last ones. Don't flip over them yet. There we go, don't come back. I always, again, put the pretty side down, flip it over. Just makes it a little bit easier for the transfer process, so you don't have to worry so much about that. Give this. Here you can see our onions are nice and translucent. We're starting to get a little bit of that caramelization on our garlic as well on there. So it smells fantastic. And we can start getting our tomatoes ready to dice up. I am using fresh tomatoes in here because I find it tastes delicious for the soup. Let's pop these guys and then we'll be ready. We're gonna we'll brush them before we pop these in the oven in a little bit. We'll brush them with a little bit of an egg wash and bake them at 450, so they bake at a pretty high temperature, but only for 8 minutes. 8 minutes for this size. If you do bigger, you'll need to make the pretzels bigger, so less of them, you'll need to do a little bit longer. And again, if you make the pretzels smaller, you won't need to do quite as long. It just varies, you know, the bigger it just needs a little, you know, and it varies by 30 seconds to a minute, how much more time or less time you need. So it's not too much of a difference on there. Okay, let's get this guy. Pop these off here. And again, make sure you shake off the extra liquid because you don't want it to puddle on your dough at the, you know, as it bakes, because then it can make it a little bit soggy. That's why, again, having a nice slotted spoon works really well for this. Okay, we are done with this. I'll let that sit there. And what I'm going to do, because I'm going to steal a little bit of my eggs that we're going to use for breading to brush this, because I never need a full egg to coat the top of my my bread. It's always like you need a third of an egg, but you can't just use a third of an egg. So I'm going to whisk this up, and then we'll steal a little bit out in a bowl, and that way we can brush it over. This is going to give our pretzels their nice little shine for, you know, just gives them that golden brown color and a little bit of a shine, makes them a little bit more pretty. You could always use like a cream to give them more of a matte brown color to it, but egg is the best. Gives you the best look. Does nothing to the flavor, just the look. Okay, now that I've got this whipped up, I'm going to grab a small bowl. Again, I don't need very much egg in here because you don't need a whole lot to get that shine on there. So I'm just going to fork out a little bit. That way I'm not wasting a lot of egg. I'm going to add a splash of water because you don't want it to be direct egg on there, because then it can get clotted. Not the easiest to mix up when it's a small batch, but that works. And I'm going to brush this over the top of each one of our pretzels so that when I'm ready to bake it off, they'll be ready. And just you want to kind of coat them up, because if you miss any spot, it just won't be shiny there. You can see, you know, how little egg we're actually going to use for it, but it does make a difference for that end-all look on it. Okay, get these guys coated up. And then you want to make sure your oven is preheated to 450. And I always like to make sure it's at a nice 450 for a good 5 minutes before it in. Don't put it in as soon as it beeps, because when you open up that oven, it does drop down a couple degrees. So you want it to be holding at that temperature for a while so you don't lose too much when you open that oven door. And I do not put my salt on until afterwards. What I will do is I'll take a little bit of room temperature butter, brush it over the top, and then I will salt some of them, and I'll put cinnamon sugar on some, so you have a mixture of dessert and salted pretzels, so it just works well. We'll pop those in just a second. Beautiful. Okay. Let me grab a little bit of my tomato paste that we're going to put in here, so it can kind of simmer up with those flavors. We're going to be using the fresh tomatoes and the tomato paste. I'm going to use, you know, about a good tablespoon or so. I think I'm just going to use it up, the rest of this that I have. So about a tablespoon and a half of tomato paste. This is going to help give it a richer kind of base to our broth than just the straight up tomatoes. Just gives you more of that tomato flavor, especially since we're going to be using some chicken broth in here, or bouillon and water. Toast it up in there so that way that garlic really infuses into the that tomato paste. And then we're going to add in some spices in here. We're going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to use a little bit of an Italian medley, not too much, but I'm going to do about a teaspoon of it. A little bit of black pepper. About a half a teaspoon. And then we're going to do a little bit of garlic salt. If you want to, you could add in some fresh basil to do more of a tomato basil on there. But I'm just kind of keeping it a really simple tomato soup. We were funny as we were walking through the store. Torrin was like, my son, he was like, have you ever had the tomato soup in a can? And I was like, I mean, when I was a kid, but I said, it's not like the tomato soup you think. It's very, very different than what I make. It's fresh homemade tomato soup is very different from canned tomato soup. And he goes, do you think I would like it? And I was like, no, I don't think you'd like it. But you know, you never know. He might. Kids always surprise me with what they do like. Let's let that simmer for a second. Let me grab that fork. And get ready to flay up our things. I'm gonna mix up these eggs just a little bit better. Get any of the egg whites out. There we go. And let's start cutting up some of our tomatoes. All you have to do is take out the core right here, that little stub, because that's not going to chop up well. And then a coarse dice on them because we are going to be pureeing them, so you don't need to chop them up very fine. And then we're gonna let them saute for a while. We'll prep up our chicken. Once our chicken's about ready to fry, what we're gonna do is we'll pop our pretzels in the oven and get our chicken frying. Finish up our soup, and then it will be dinner time. We'll see if Torn is happy. I originally, because he was kind of like, oh, can we have, you know, he wanted pretzels. And I was like, oh, I'll make beef stew, because I always make beef stew and pretzels. And he's like, I don't really want beef stew. I want fried chicken. And I was like, okay. And he was like, and I want tomato soup. I want soup. He's like, I feel like a soup today. And I was like, okay, well, what soup? And he was like, chicken noodle soup. And I was like, oh, didn't really have the chicken to make chicken noodle soup, like a good, you know, because when I make chicken noodle soup, I like to make it with the chicken thighs to make a really good, you know, broth out of it. And I didn't have that. And I was like, well, and he's like, how about this? And this is a Torn creation meal. You know, his last creation meal, which was the fried chicken and mac and cheese wrap, was pretty darn good. So we'll see if he has another solid gold hit with tonight's dinner or has led us astray. I know normally whenever I make tomato soup or whatnot, I always make it with grilled cheese, but since we've been out and about so much and not at home, I don't have any sourdough prepped up to have for like a bread, so I was like, we gotta do a different grain. And pretzels it was. Now, it might seem like we're putting on a lot of tomatoes. We've got 9 pretty good sized vine ripe tomatoes. They are also gonna be part of the liquid for our soup, but when you puree them up, they're gonna shrink down a lot. So they may look like a lot now, but they're not as much as you think. Give this a good stir. Start mixing it in. Kind of coat it up with our seasoned up tomato paste. I always put that tomato paste in first with the spices to let it get some of that heat on, because the tomatoes have so much, you know, liquid in them that if you do it afterwards, they're not going to get that good temperature on that pan. They'll be more in a liquid. Okay, let me get this out of the way and get our chicken going. Okay, let me give this a good stir, and then we'll season up our dredge and fillet our chicken in half so that we've got about 6 good sized pieces to work with. So we're gonna start with our seasoned dredge. I'm gonna use about 2 cups of flour. Always use a little bit more than you think you're gonna need, because you don't want to have to go halfway through and make some more. We're going to put in about a tablespoon. We're going to use the rest. So a tablespoon of onion powder. It's going to give a nice savory flavor, a little bit of golden color to it. About a half a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. Kind of goes well with the tomato soup. And we're going to do a half a tablespoon of Mrs. Dash's table blend. a teaspoon of black pepper, because I do want a little kick there. And then a half a tablespoon of paprika. This is gonna give it a nice amber kind of color to it when it fries up. Grab a fork to toss this. And then after we do our first dredging, we will put our breadcrumbs in it. I've got some seasoned panko breadcrumbs, and we'll pop those in there to give it an extra crunch on it. So just mix it all around, make sure it gets kind of coated up in here. And I'm going to fill up my pan here with some oil so that it will be nice and hot when we're ready to fry. You don't need to have your chicken completely submerged, just halfway. So I just like to make a good basin on it. Depending on what size pan you use is going to be how much oil you need. This is a 12-inch pan, so I probably used about a cup and a half of oil in there. But you don't need to have it drenched, so that will save you a good amount of oil. I'm going to heat it up. We're going to heat it up on high until it's nice and hot, then we'll turn it down to a medium when we go to cook the chicken so that you don't burn it before it's cooked all the way through. We're also going to fillet our chickens in half. That way they will be thinner when we fry them up, so they'll cook up more evenly. Try to cut against the grain so that you have a more tender piece of chicken. When it fries up, that means you're gonna have a rougher edge look to it. And I just kind of go through and put it all the way through. It doesn't have to be a perfect fillet all the way through. I actually kind of like to do more of a kind of lots of little cuts because it makes it more tender when you're eating it. It breaks up those fibers in there, so your chicken is nice and tender. And then again, trim off any fat, which is those like white pieces that you see on the chicken. Trim that off because when you're frying it, it's not going to get crispy. It's just going to be chewy, so it will not be as nice to eat. Let's trim this bit off right here. Okay, so we've got 6 pretty good sized fillets here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into our dredge. Keep one hand clean, dredge with just one hand, so this is my clean hand. We're gonna dredge it in here, coat it up with our seasoned dredge. You know what I realized I forgot to add to our dredge? Is a little bit of garlic salt. There's no salt in here, which means it would be a little bland. So I'm gonna put this one on this directly, and then we're gonna season this up. You're gonna want about a tablespoon or so of garlic salt in here. Very big key to have it. There we go. Otherwise, your chicken will be bland. You need a little bit of salt. There we go. Good save. How did I miss my beloved garlic salt? There. And then once we've got these ready to fry off, we'll pop our pretzels in the oven. We'll add a little bit of our broth to our tomatoes to let them simmer in there. And then we'll fry off our chicken and we'll be ready to eat. So let's get our first coat of our dredge on here. Then we're gonna add our panko breadcrumbs back in here. And that's gonna give more of a crunch to our breading. Now this is a hand breaded, so it's gonna have more of the texture of a hand breaded versus like a battered fried chicken or whatnot. But it works really well for chicken breasts or like pork chops, fish. I think it works really well for. Cod I love to have battered instead of a hand breading, but for these it works really well. So now using your clean hand, we're gonna add in about a cup of our panko breadcrumbs. gonna mix it in. There we go. And then we're gonna go into the egg, coat it up. This is gonna bind with that first coating, and it's gonna create kind of like a glue that will hold this second layer on. So it's really important because otherwise your breading won't hold on and stick. So into the flour, and you can just see how that egg mixture just sticks to the chicken instead of sliding off. And then we'll check the temperature of our oil in just a second. You don't want to put your chicken into cold oil. You need it to be nice and hot. For me, I find if you take just a tiny little drop of water and drop it in there, if it sizzles right away, then you're going to know that it's ready to things. Just a tiny drop. And that will tell you the perfect heat, because if it doesn't sizzle right away, your oil's too cold, and then you will have a soggy chicken instead of a crispy fried chicken. So if you're gonna do all the work, you wanna make sure you do it right. Get these guys in here. Perfect. And my rule of thumb, if you're figuring out how many eggs to use, one chicken breast typically needs 1 egg. So I filleted my chicken breast in half, but I still needed just about 3 eggs for this.
You have a question? Is there anything added to the eggs, and what's in the flour mixture?
There's nothing added to the eggs, but the flour mixture, for the first dredging, we added in garlic salt, Italian seasoning, Mrs. Dash's table blend, paprika and onion powder and black pepper. And then after we did the first dredge, then we added in some panko breadcrumbs so that it will have a nice extra crunch to it. And then of course our flour. We'll coat this up, and then I think we're getting pretty close on that oil over there. So we'll be able to drop these in. And then we'll be able to pop our things in. And then I always like to give my chicken a really good pat down. It just kind of helps hold those spices and those seasonings on there. Okay, I'm gonna, before I wash my hands good, I'm gonna take a small drip of water. Sizzles right away. So I'm gonna turn it down to a medium, and we're gonna put our first pieces of chicken in here. Alright, don't overcrowd, because you don't want too much in there at a time, or you won't get it cooked up nicely. Okay. Grab a pair of tongs, just maneuver that one around. They all have a little bit of space between each one. I'm going to wash up my hands nice and good. Then we're going to pop these pretzels in the oven. That way they'll cook up nicely. It's always a mess to get other breading off, but it's well worth it. Okay. Our pretzels that we brushed with our egg wash after we boiled them off, we're going to bake in our oven at 450 degrees. You want them to be on that kind of top rack right there so they get that direct heat. And we're going to bake these for 8 minutes. I'm going to set my timer for 8 minutes, and then we'll be ready to grab them out, and they'll sit. It'll be delicious. Okay. Let me clean up my little egg mess over here, and then we're going to be ready to stir our tomatoes, put in our broth, let it simmer, and we'll get ready for our chicken. Now when we fry up our chicken, our cutlets like this, you want to put them either on paper towels or like a cookie cooling rack, so that they don't get soggy when you take them back out again, because they will, if they sit on a flat surface, the oil in them will make it soggy instead of crunchy. You want a nice crunchy fillet. So we'll do just a little quick cleanup here. That way it's a little bit cleared off for our workspace. Then I rotate my pan just a little bit because I know that the top part of my oven cooks a little bit faster. I'll know right when I see a little bit of the golden edges coming around that we'll be ready to flip them off, flip them over into the next side. We can see our tomatoes are starting to break down a little bit, which is perfect. And we're gonna add in just a little bit of water and then a scoop of chicken bouillon for things. We'll add in a little bit of cream towards the very end to make it a nice creamy tomato basil soup. Do not add too much liquid. Too much liquid will give you a very runny soup. You need a little bit, but not much. I think I'm gonna use just around a cup. I just gotta see how it looks on there. Smidge more. So just around a cup of water. And then I'm gonna get a spoon and we're gonna add a heaping spoonful of chicken bouillon because we need enough to flavor all of the tomatoes. So it's more than just the liquid you're gonna use, which is why I'm gonna say you wanna use water and bouillon over just chicken broth, because this will give us a lot more flavor in there. So we want a nice big heaping spoonful of this. A smidge more. There we go. So like around a tablespoon. We're gonna mix it in. We're gonna let this simmer with that broth. You just want enough to where all of those tomatoes are kind of underneath the water just a little bit.
Got a question? What kind of chicken bouillon are you using?
So this is the better than roasted chicken bouillon. You buy it, it's in the same aisle as like the chicken broth, but once you open it, you have to refrigerate it. But I do like it because it's not a powder, it's a paste, and it has a lot of great flavor.
Could you use the vegetable one?
Yes, you definitely can use the vegetable one. Either one really works well. I use the chicken one because we're having chicken with tonight's dinner, but the vegetable one does work wonderful with this meal. Good. I think that's a good amount of seasoning in there. Check out our chicken. Beautiful. Nice kind of golden fry. You've got those kind of darker colors from the spices and that paprika, which gives it a nice amber, like a reddish color to it. Let that simmer here.
And how many tomatoes did you use?
I used 9 good-sized vine tomatoes. They were pretty big, so it would probably be closer to 11 or 12 of the average vine-sized tomatoes, so it was a good amount. Now, I love to do fresh tomatoes, but you can always use like canned tomatoes and puree it up. It's just not going to have quite as nice of a flavor. And sometimes I'll use half and half, you know. Now, if you do use canned tomatoes, you don't need to use quite as much liquid, like add in the broth. You might just need to add in the bouillon because canned tomatoes have a lot more liquid kind of in them. We're getting our paper towels ready for taking out our chicken here. And again, remember when we heated up our oil, we heated it up on high, and then when we popped the chicken in, I turned it down to, I've got it on about a 4. Cook the chicken low and slow over a medium-low heat. That way you'll get a nice golden crust on it without burning it, and it will allow your chicken to cook all the way through. And grab my soup. Resting.
Do you have a good chicken noodle soup recipe?
I do have a fabulous chicken noodle soup recipe. I have a recipe card available for our members on there. as well as a video that is available for everybody on how to make it. And I make it with my broth from scratch using, you know, a mixture of chicken thighs and chicken breasts, like split breasts with the skin on, because that really does make the best broth for it. I do have to still have to go digging through there, but I have both of those available. And everyone raves about my chicken noodle soup. And I will say one of the secret ingredients, and it's not really even secret, is you can get these noodles that are home style noodles that you can buy in the freezer section at your grocery store. And they taste as if you made homemade noodles, which is, they just elevate it and they don't get soggy in your soup, which is what I think makes them the best. Okay, we're gonna get ready to blend up our soup here in just a second. I'm gonna use my Vitamix. I am going to add in my cream now, so it can simmer for just a little bit before we blend it. Now, you need a lot less cream than people think when you're making a soup. So just start with about like 1/3 of a cup. You can always add a little bit more after you blend it, but I find to get that creamy flavor, it's a lot less than people think. You can see I don't think I used a full 1/3 of a cup in here, but just the color change from adding it in is pretty incredible. It went from like a red to a beautiful orange. Okay, I'm gonna grab my ladle here and we're gonna start ladling it in. I'm gonna turn off my stove for it, but let me check my chicken. See how it's looking. It's still a little pale, so you see it's got like a very light coloring to it. I want it to get darker like that, so still needs about 2 more minutes for this one. I'm gonna grab a ladle here, and we're gonna start ladling into, let me see, into my Vitamix. The one thing I do love about the Vitamix is it has a soup setting, which is really nice for when you make homemade soups, because it has like a really good simple blend program where it starts slower and lower and then it goes up nice and fast. Okay, we'll be about ready to grab our pretzels out of the oven here. Set this down and then we'll come right back to it. So just rotate. So we've got our pretzels baking. I'm gonna just slide this over here. Let me grab a trivet and then we can pop those out. So I'm gonna grab the right over here because there'll be a big hot tray when we're ready. So these are homemade pretzels that have been baking at 450 for about 8 minutes. Let's see. I think I might want them in here for maybe 1 more minute, but let me rotate them around. We're gonna pop them in here. I want them to get a little bit more brown on them. So I'm gonna put my timer on. We'll do 1 more minute, which will go by really, really fast. And I'll pop those out here. I want them to have a little bit more brown edges on them for it. I always set my timer a little bit big because when I make my little ones, they go cook up really, really fast. About the time we have this ladled in here, I will be ready. And then we're gonna blend up our soup. Get a few more chunks. Now, if you like your tomato soup to have a little bit of texture, just leave some of those tomato chunks and those onions and whatnot into the bottom of your pan. And then you can, you'll be there, it'll blend up nicely, and then when you stir it back in, you'll have those chunks in there. Okay, before we blend it, I'm gonna go grab those pretzels since they are now ready. And then our chicken should be just about ready to pop out. Ah, perfect. So it's funny how just a little bit longer can give you those just beautiful kissed brown edges on your pretzels that just make them look a little bit more beautiful. So here are our delicious homemade pretzels. They're with our yeast dough. They're nice and soft. We're gonna let them cool for just about a minute here, and then we're gonna rub them over with some butter and put our pretzel salt on it. But again, they are like a soft pretzel versus a crispy German pretzel. Okay, we're gonna take our chicken out. You see we've got this nice golden fry. You want to put it grease side down so it stays nice and crispy. And shake off a little bit. And if you can do paper towels, or you can do the like a cookie cooling rack. I like the paper towels. It's kind of similar to bacon. I feel like they work really well. We're gonna put our next batch in here. We'll blend up our soup. And we'll be and we'll butter and salt and cinnamon our pretzels. Okay. Let those fry up here. Yep, I turned all of that off. Sometimes I feel like I hear a phantom timer going off. Okay, I'm gonna put my hot soup setting on. I'm gonna push start. Start slow, and then it will go up higher in just about a second. And it doesn't take long. It goes really, really fast to give you this beautiful soup. So here we've got our creamy tomato soup, and it's got like kind of this nice velvety texture to it, not like a super thick like a bisque, but a nice rich thickness to it, as you can see, but not as thick as like a butternut squash soup, but still that beautiful velvetyness to it. And that's because tomatoes have a lot of liquid with them, so you can't add too much. You saw we just added a cup of broth to it to add just a bit more flavor to it, but again, just gorgeous. Let's steal a little taste here. Fabulous. And let's butter up our pretzels. I'll get some of my cinnamon sugar for those that we will do dessert. And then we'll be about ready to serve up here. So you want to use room temperature butter, and then you're just going to go while they're still hot. You're going to rub it over the tops. As you see, it just melts right over it. You could always melt it and brush it over the top, but this is really easy, so this is what I like to do. And we'll go right over the top of each one. And you can see like the ones that I did my pretzel shapes, and then the ones I did my little crazy twirly, swirly things. I think my twirly, swirly ones bake up better. I'm gonna call it the LC swirl. We'll rub this over. Nice. And then you can't use regular salt. You need to use a pretzel salt because it is not as salty as a regular salt. It's, you know, it's essentially been like mixed with a water and some other base and then dehydrated again, so it's really flaky. So you can put like a good amount on there without getting like hit with too much salt. Like kosher salt is just too salty for this.
2 questions. Where can you find the pretzel salt, and can you use an immersion blender for the soup?
So the pretzel salt, I actually got mine on Amazon because I find it's really hard to find in the grocery store. I believe I have it on my Amazon storefront as well. And there's actually this one, and then there's this like Boise pretzel salt. I love that one as well. And then I have, I was like, yeah, because you can't find it anywhere. For the soup, you can definitely use an immersion blender. It's just gonna take you a little bit longer. And I do find that the immersion blender doesn't give you quite as much of the smooth texture. It leaves a little bit of chunks in there. And then I'm just sprinkling a little bit of cinnamon sugar over because half my kids also love a cinnamon sugar pretzel for dessert. Again, these won't even make it to the next day. These are our favorite. But it's a great way to make a batch of pretzels and you can have both dessert and dinner with them. Okay. I don't think these are ready, not yet. I'm gonna roll my plate over, but since we have enough food for our dinner to plate up, we will plate up our dinner here and yeah, get ready to serve up here. Let me just get a little paper towel, wipe up a little bit of my mess because you know me, always making messes. Okay, and I realize I've got to break out some of my Christmas dishes. And I'm gonna try to convince my mom to give me some of her Christmas spode. I love it, I've always wanted it, and I've always said I'm not gonna collect it because I know my mom will give me some. And since she doesn't host Christmas anymore, she has, I think, 20 settings of spode. I'm like, she can share the love, send a little my way, and then I can have my spode on there. I'm gonna rotate this way. Okay, but we've got my little cauldron, my pan, and let's start out. We'll start out with our soup. So for dinner tonight, we have our creamy tomato soup made with 9 fresh vine-ripe tomatoes, 2 yellow onions, 6 cloves of garlic, a nice, third cup of cream, some Italian spices, garlic, salt, pepper, and blended for this just creamy deliciousness. We're going to serve it with our fried chicken cutlet that we seasoned with Italian spices, Mrs. Dash's table blend, and our panko breadcrumbs. A homemade soft pretzel with our pretzel soft on it. And again, this is our yeast dough. So it is just a really soft and tender pretzel, perfect for dipping in our soup. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you just have to go to our page, search for what we made, so our tomato soup and our homemade pretzels, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets. I believe it also has our pretzel salt in there as well. So all the different things you see in my kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.